we are again, another episode of Let's Talk Music Richmond. Okay, and we have continued the conversation from the last conversation about some of these outstanding musicians who have passed on and gone on to glory. Some of those folks that we just did not get an opportunity to sit down with and speak to. You're going to have to tell me who Jackie Epps is.
I was a member of a band called Soul Syndicate. Jackie Epps played lead guitar.
Oh, wow.
One of his brothers played upright bass. I can't remember the band. And he had another brother, Donald, that played flute.
So and the group you said was called the Soul...
Soul Syndicate.
Soul Syndicate.
Mm-hmm. Around what time of year, what years was that operation?
The Soul Syndicate was in the 60s.
In the 60s, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack Epps was the lead guitar player. That's great. Man, it's great.
And also with a group I was in called Pearl and the Soul Brothers.
Pearl and the Soul Brothers.
Yeah.
Hey, Pearl, do you know how many groups you've been in? Did you ever count to see how many different groups you have been in?
No.
I think if I had $1 for all the groups I've been in, I could pay my mortgage.
Well, if you had $1 for all the musicians that you have worked with, you could pay a whole lot of folks mortgage.
That's right.
You work with a lot of musicians.
But you know what? I thank God for allowing me to meet these fabulous musicians. And one of my favorite, Boo Gates.
Oh my God. Oh yeah.
Boo Gates was he was my idol.
Oh, Boo Gates was, oh man. Moonlight in Vermont. That was the song he killed me with every time. Boo Gates was just a powerhouse.
Yes, he was.
Saxophone player.
Yes, he was.
And his son is carrying on that legacy as well.
Yes, yes.
You know, one thing I'm a little jealous about, and I think I'm a little jealous right here. Y'all sax players are more of a brotherhood than probably anybody else I know around here. Saxophone players seem to appreciate and y'all seem to have like that thing that everybody said, because she mentioned all these sax players, Johnny Payton, Boo Gates, and Carl Nails and all. And I'm going like, wait a minute, all these sax folks be getting me, they like hooked up with each, they cool with each other.
It's actually woodwind players because flute players are included, like Miss Marsha Meekins.
Well, there's not that many of Marsha's though. I mean, Marsha, you know.
Well, most of the sax players were flute players.
They play flute also, right?
Quite a few of them would play flute.
Right.
So Marsha would have a lot of input about some of these sax players, like Johnny Payton or Boo Gates or Bernard Robinson or Carlton Massenberg. Marsha, tell us a little bit of background about yourself and your involvement with some of these people like Jackie Epps or Robert Brown, whoever Pearl has mentioned so far.
Well, you know, Charles, as far as saxophone players that helped me, I would have to say Pearl and Plunky were the main two who worked
Thank you,
with
baby.
me.
Thank you.
And as far as flute players, Glenroy Bailey.
Yes.
When I first decided I wanted to play jazz, I went and sat with Glenroy Bailey and learned from him. But also, not just sax and flute players, I wish I could remember the name of the guitar player. He lived over on North Side, an older gentleman that BJ turned me on to, and I studied with him. Do you remember who that was, Pearl?
Let me think. Was it Harold Harrison?
That's who it was.
Bad guitarist.
And we need to put his name on there. That's him. Yes.
Has he passed?
Yeah, long time ago.
No.
Earl Harrison.
Yeah.
Yup, he sat down. I still have a sheet of music. He wrote out a nice arrangement of My Funny Valentine for me. And I kept that for years because it was in his handwriting. But yes, he was a big help to me. And Debo Dabney. Debo Dabney was the one that would sit down with me and make me play Charlie Parker over and over and over. He said, if you can play Charlie Parker, you can play. And I didn't like Charlie Parker at the time because it was hard. But Debo,
a lot of syncopation,
on it. And we would go over and over again. Now, he introduced me to Yusef Lateef. And to this day, that's like my hero, Yusef Lateef, as far as his flute and sax playing. But yes, Johnny Payton, my teacher,
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Maurice Williams.
Maurice Williams.
Yeah.
Both of those guys, my teachers, Maurice Williams and Johnny
And
Payton.
then we had Mr. Singleton.
Royal Singleton, that's right.
Royal Singleton, right. One of the
Royal
first
Singleton, right.
Let me
first
go.
group of black folks in the Richmond Symphony. Him and D. Antoinette Handy Miller, my flute teacher.
Well,
And,
since you mentioned the Richmond Symphony, I have to interject Joe Kennedy.
Joe
Joe
Kennedy.
Kennedy, that's right.
Okay, we have to put that name in the list.
Yeah. And Thomas Brand, what was Thomas?
Briggs.
Bridge. Thomas Bridge.
Thomas Bridge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Tell me about Al Bolin.
Al Bolin was a trumpet player in a band, well, the Soul Syndicate. He was the leader of the band and also a trumpet player.
Who else you got, Charles?
I've got Earl Sneed. I'm not familiar with Earl Sneed.
Earl Sneed was a jazz saxophonist, Doug Sneed's brother.
I told you he was kin to Doug.
He's kin to Doug Sneed.
Right.
Really?
He was his brother.
Yeah.
I see. Walter Fleming. Tell me about it.
Walter Fleming was a guitarist. He taught my brother to play guitar. My father taught my brother and I to play acoustic guitar. And Walter came along with his electric guitar and worked with my brother. I don't know what band he ever played with, or can't remember what year that was.
Okay.
I remember the name now, Charles, because you mentioned Fleming. It was Fleming Askew. You remember that name?
I remember that name.
Fleming Askew. Did you know Fleming Askew?
I just remember the name.
Fleming Askew and Poochie Ross and them were all in together in that whole thing.
I knew Poochie Ross.
Yeah. Poochie Ross, because Fleming Askew, because Askew used to come in. He and when Johnny Payton wanted to make all those young bucks feel bad, he brought Askew in and he brought Tuscan Jazz Band. And these are the guys that have gone on to glory also, Charles. That's why I said. But he brought them in, and they just made all those young hotheads think like we thought we was all that in a bag of chips. And Fleming Askew and Tuscan would come in and make us all feel bad. We just put our horns up, say, whatever, play funk.
Tell me about James Taylor, the guitar player. James Taylor.
James Taylor was a guitarist. I don't think he ever played in a band, but he was really good. He taught my brother a lot about the guitar also.
Uh-huh. And what is your brother's name?
Ben Harvey.
Ben Harvey.
Ben doesn't play our type of music, devil music anymore. He's strictly gospel.
Strictly gospel on the devil's music. I don't know about the devil's music, but go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna leave that alone.
Yeah.
Tiny Tim drummer. Okay, no, and this is where we have a habit of growing up knowing people by their nicknames.
Right.
The whole time, all their entire life, that's all we know is a nickname. So when you read in the Sunday obituaries that John Henry Lewis passed away, you don't know
who that is.
That Mojo Face that we used to call, we don't know that. So who is Tiny Tim?
Tiny Tim was the drummer that played with Lil Walter and the Bonnevilles when I was there.
I never would have known that. I never would have known that.
But you know what? Somebody mentioned Tiny Tim to us. It was either somebody we interviewed. Wasn't Lou Kelso? Who did we interview that was old school? Lil Tommy. Lil Tommy mentioned Tiny Tim.
Right.
In our conversation. He mentioned Tiny Tim was playing drums.
He used to watch him all the time to learn.
That's right. That's how I knew the name because Lil Tommy mentioned him.
That's true.
Yeah. That was also Tommy Lewis, drummer. You remember him?
Right.
Put that name down on my list. Tommy Lewis.
Tommy Lewis. Tommy Lewis was bad. He played a double bass drum.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you on the list now. We got Hugo Jackson. Now, I was not aware
And he
that
just
Hugo
passed.
had just
Yeah,
passed.
yeah.
I was not aware at
Right.
all of
Yeah.
that. You know,
He
I
and
knew I know
Johnny
Bill
Payton
mentioned
were
to me that
buddies.
he had been ill in the past year, but I was not aware that he had passed.
Because I had made arrangements for us to interview him on Let's Talk Music Richmond. And what I got back from him was that he wasn't able at the time to really remember many things that from that
Right,
era. Right.
right.
He was suffering from some memory loss. And
But he was
but
such a strong influence in the music scene during the '60s, in particular. Very very impactful as a performer, and had his group performing all the time. So you
yeah,
know,
and not only that, but he was a very influential music teacher for a lot of the young guys who are out here now in their 30s and 40s. When he was the band director at Huguenot, he
right.
influenced a whole lot of young musicians. He and Tuscan Jasper and Johnny Payton, and we can't leave out Dave Williams. We cannot leave out
Yeah.
that whole group of music
Yeah.
teachers that Marsha and I worked with
Yep.
that were like the senior. When Marsha and I worked in the school system, these were like our
Our elders.
yeah. We had a clique, Charles.
So
Go
what I
ahead.
need you and Marsha to do is give me that list of names of those music teachers who have passed away at this time.
Well, they're almost all on this list that we're going through.
Okay, so give me. I mean,
Because you
make
mentioned
sure-
Joe Kennedy, I mentioned Dave Williams, you mentioned Tuscan Jasper, we mentioned Johnny Payton, we mentioned Royal Singleton,
Lloyd Ricks.
and Hugo, Lloyd Ricks,
Lloyd
and
Ricks.
then
Sam Grant, Samuel Grant.
see, I didn't know Samuel Grant. There's one I wanted to ask Pearl about was the Peters man, Jay Peters. I guess it was Jay Peters, a saxophone player that Plunky was talking about. His daughter is still here in Richmond now. And on 3rd Street, where you see that mural that everybody thinks is Plunky, Plunky shared with me that that's Jay Peters. Were you familiar with him at all, Pearl?
No, I don't know him.
I don't know him
Okay.
either.
Well, he'd be somebody worth looking with because he left here to work with Lionel Hampton.
Oh,
And he went out and did some serious jazz when he left here.
okay.
Serious jazz. But yeah, he's one of the old guys back Poochie Ross. See, Poochie and he taught Poochie and Lonnie Liston Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them said that he was one. When I was doing some research on Poochie, his name came up here in Richmond, the Peters name. So go ahead, Charles. I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. Dave Hoggett,
David Hoggett, drummer.
Hoggett, drummer.
Yeah,
Okay.
David Hoggett, the drummer. He's in that same group of music teachers
Yes.
and jazz drummers and vibraphonists.
Yeah.
We knew.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we knew Dave well, and Dave and Hugo probably set the standard for the jazz trio, jazz quartet thing that was going on here in Richmond when all of us were young bucks, kind of like. Dave and Hugo were doing the serious little small trio jazz. Dave Hoggett was a phenomenal musician. Excellent drummer, repairman.
Oh,
His
yeah.
son, Dave Hoggett Jr., plays drums now
Yeah.
Yeah,
Lord.
in the air, right?
But
Yeah,
Lord
but-
knows we all miss Dave because
Yeah.
everybody, you don't let everybody touch your flute. But Dave was the one that all of us around here went to.
yes.
Yeah, he fixed instruments, Charles. Whether I think it was after he was probably in the middle of working when you were here, and the difference is Dave Hoggett did not teach high school like say Ricks and Peyton and Jasper and Hugo. Dave taught middle and elementary school like Royal Singleton
He
and
taught
other guys.
in Hanover. He didn't
Right.
teach in Richmond. He taught in Hanover.
Right.
Okay. Lord Hoggett.
Claude Harvey was my oldest brother. He played jazz drums, and he was responsible for me loving jazz because in the household where we came up in, we couldn't listen to rock and roll or any other type music, and we were into country and western. And he took me to his house and played these jazz albums like Dakota Staten, people like that, Nancy Wilson.
Oh yeah.
And he played in a band. I was a kid. I think he played in a band called the Belltones and Dave Wild's group. That was a long time ago.
So
I mean, when I was a kid, we were into country western.
Oh, okay.
Lawrence Welk.
Yeah, we watched Lawrence Welk and Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah, you had to be into as well. I mean, you know, for me, my starting out was always turning on and looking at the clarinet player from New Orleans.
Pete Fontaine.
Look, guys, this I'm holding right here. I keep it close to hand. Pete Fountain gave this to me when I met him.
Oh wow!
This is his clarinet reeds. And I've got 10 reeds in this case. I have never opened it. I've had this thing for years.
Wow!
When I had opportunities to meet him, I used to rehearse in front of a mirror, trying to play Autumn Leaves and songs that came from his album when I was a kid. I mean, I was probably about 11 years old at the time and saw him on Johnny Carson. And I said, I'm going to play like that. And then many years later, many years later, I was in New Orleans and my wife and I was passing through and I said, that's a Hilton Hotel and that's Pete Fountain performing tonight. I said, I've got to go in there and meet this guy. So I went in there and sat down with him. And of course, you know, it was only one of us there.
Yeah.
And we stood up. And I tell you, I sat there in awe with my mouth wide open watching this guy. And he and Al Hurt. Al was really at the end of his life cycle. But Pete was pretty aged as well. And I got an opportunity to watch both these guys play.
So let me ask you a question, John. Is that why you wear your hair like that? Because of Pete Fountain?
Right here.
So you mentioned Al Hurt. So I thought about the three people, since you and Marsha and I are sitting here, the three influences would have been Pete Fountain, Al Hurt, all of them got the little beard thing. And guess who else, Marsha? Herbie Mann.
Oh,
Herbie
Mann, right? If you think Pete Fountain and Herbie Mann, you'd be going like, well, which one of them is,
Brother Love, we opened for Herbie Mann when he performed in Richmond at the Richmond Coliseum. And of course, I was playing my little piccolo flute at the time. And it was just a lot of fun to get up there and open for, a great musician like that. I mean, it was, oh God, man, that was fun. Jesse Ivy, who was Jesse Ivy?
Jesse Ivy was a drummer. He was an older man that played with Mays and the Valiants.
Pearl, beautiful thing is, baby, you still here to talk about this, and it's a whole lot of folk.
Memory.
It's a whole lot of folk that came up with you that are on here. This is why you're the right person to talk about this, because you've seen a whole lot of folk go by the wayside.
Yeah.
Off to paradise. Who else, Charles, after Ivy?
She got Nat Valentine on here. Well-known Nat Valentine.
Yeah.
Excellent singer. I knew about Nat Valentine again as a youngster. I knew about Nat Valentine performing. So, Pearl, what do you remember about Nat Valentine?
I know that he sang with John Mills and the Dale Vikings.
Wow.
Dale Vikings.
You remember John Mills and the
Dale Vikings?
Wow. I remember that name.
Singer, along with Mae Washington.
Right.
Wow, Dale Vikings. Woo.
Yeah, the Dale Vikings. They go back.
Yeah.
All right. Who else, Charles?
Otis Hamlin.
Otis Hamlin was a sax player that played with the Soul Syndicate when I was
Syndicate.
Wow.
And Harold Scott.
He was the singer with the Soul Syndicate.
Okay.
Hey, Pearl, you got any pictures of these groups?
I sure don't.
Wow.
No.
Call her name out for
Dot Davis?
Yeah, Dot Davis.
Dot Davis, Dot was my best friend from the time I met her. We were best friends to the day she took her last breath.
Yeah.
Not
And
only was
and you
she,
talking about a sweetheart?
huh?
You talking about a
Yeah.
nice person? You know, I've been focusing on these nice people like that. Just
Right.
as sweet as she could be.
Had a beautiful singing voice. She was an oboe major. She
Right.
played oboe, bassoon, and clarinet, but she played bass with the jazz ladies. And she had been taking lessons like 2 weeks when she did her first gig with us.
And she was
And she just
good.
got better and better
Yeah.
and better
Yeah.
till she contracted MS.
Right.
That's
And
when
that's
she
right.
had to step away. But she was a fantastic musician.
Yeah.
Very talented. All of us were in school together at Virginia State.
Yeah.
And that's how I knew Dot and Marsha and that whole but Pearl, I was really, really impressed with you guys. You know what I remember about you all, or what I remember in relationship to you all? Sixth Street
What?
Marketplace.
Yeah.
See, you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
We don't even,
that was our gig, wasn't it, Marsha?
Yeah.
yeah, nobody even remembers. You know, you think about Sixth Street Marketplace, but Charles, they had the food court lit up. They had the food court lit up. You had Michelle Hammer.
Yes. Yes.
That's right.
Okay.
Michelle started playing with us. She was 16
She
years
was
old.
in high school at the time. I remember.
Yep.
You're 16?
She was
Yeah.
16.
Wow.
So before you and I even think about wrapping this up, for the sake of the order, for the good, I have to tell everybody that one of the reasons Charles and I are doing this is because of Joe Carter.
Right.
Joe Carter was a very special person to Charles and I because Joe was a salesman. He loved music. Charles and I found out later that he was a hell of a dancer because he and the great Jose used to dance against each other back in the day.
Yeah, I remember.
You remember that?
Yes.
All right. Well, I didn't remember because I was too young. I didn't know anything about that. But what happened was Charles and I ended up being Joe's partners in crime when it came to him doing this Black history program that he used to stand on the corner and sell cassettes. And eventually we talked him into going to CDs. And Joe, for people who don't know, was in the sales and marketing and ended up being the manager of Cozy Cat, he and his partner, Tom Cephas. So we should meet you, Tom, also, because Tom was a part of this whole thing. And in doing that, Joe heard all these great bands and decided that everybody needed a manager. And he decided at that time he was going to manage all the bands. So the two people that he never managed were Charles and me. He managed Waller Family, he managed Starfire, he managed Poison. They were all on his record label. And Charles and I, being as close to Joe as we are now, would never let Joe manage our band. So it's kind of crazy because I have to lift Joe up. Joe is one of the reasons Charles and I are as close together as we are now, is because we started appreciating people who had a lot of get up and go and drive and hustle. And we realized that both of us had always had that same type of drive and hustle running our different bands. And we respected each other musically, but we also had this friendship between Joe and I. And Joe actually looked at Charles and I as two of his, not sons, but younger brothers. And he basically adopted the two of us together. And that's actually how we ended up doing this, because Joe always said we needed to record the history. And he was always a proponent and a promoter for Richmond talent.
He promote everybody.
Everybody. He promote everybody. And Joe would stand on the corner.
I need to mention a couple other people real quick while we're in this conversation that Pearl would know. And that'd be Joe Turnage at Churchill Record Show.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And somebody's doing a history now of Joe Turnage.
Joe Turnage had a major impact on the influence of music in Richmond. He was another strong supporter of all the musicians that did their own recordings as well. So we all owe a bit of gratitude to many of these folks because they weren't jealous folks. They were all encouraging and motivating and help you along. They would show you things.
I also got to invoke the name Red Forbes.
No question about it. Yes.
I got to invoke the name Red Forbes. Leonard, Baby Lynn, Red Forbes.
Big brother. Yeah,
Big brother. Baby Lynn, they called him. And all of the guys that worked with Ray Goodman and Brown, at Moment, Sylvia Robinson, and everybody else, it's because of Red Forbes. Go ahead.
Another name to mention from the Petersburg area would be Joe Jefferson, Ron Hopper,
Bill Spradley,
and Major Harris. They had the group called Nat Turner Rebellion. Major was the only one from Richmond, but the other three guys from Petersburg. And each of these,
the Hoppers
the Hoppers from Hopewell, yeah. So each of these guys, all four of these guys, went on to do amazing things in the music business. From Joe Jefferson being an outstanding writer for the Spinners. He wrote the song One of a Kind, Love Affair. He wrote the Don't You Know You Love Me, Sweet Sadie. He wrote
Brandy. He wrote Brandy.
He wrote Brandy. They're sitting by an open fireplace, my feet upon the ground. Look, I know these songs because I was a 25-year-old sax player working with Philly International at the time. And that's where I got that because of Joe Jefferson.
Right. And, Bubba Ross. I meant to mention that before. Bubba played trumpet with Chapter 7. Bubba and Sneed and Percy and Willie Edwards and
I don't want to leave out Larry Bland. I don't want to leave out his brother Doc that played trombone with me many years before that. Just so many folks that we can credit for outstanding entertainment and outstanding music during those years in Richmond when live entertainment was the thing.
Charles, I want to thank you and thank Pearl and thank Marsha for coming in and working with us on this. And this is a commemorative memory. In other words, it's when you call somebody, it's an old tradition that if you call somebody's name, they still live. Mm-hmm. People say that you don't really die until the last person that knew you is gone and nobody can call your name. So that's why we're making this video right now, so that people later on down the way, grandchildren and children, will be able to call the name of certain people, that people might not remember right now. So you call out somebody's name for the ancestors to say that this person is still living as long as we remember them. And that's the important. Pearl, there's a whole bunch of people living right now, baby, because of you. Because you remember, yes, it is. They're still alive because of you. Because now we're calling out the name, and other people will say, "Oh, I remember them from seriously." A lot of those names you call and you made us commemorate, other people will say, "Oh yeah, I remember them." Or
she was Blackwell.
Jackie Singleton,
Ernestine,
Major Harris,
Ernestine, last name
Jackson.
Yeah, that's the name we were. Mm-hmm.
Tommy Lewis. That's all I can remember. I'm sure there are a lot more that I have forgotten.
Tuscan Jasper.
Yeah,
I didn't know Ted passed.
Yeah, Jasper passed a few years ago.
Yeah. Joe.
Wow.
Dave Williams.
Maurice Williams.
Maurice Williams. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's our buddy's name that taught over at George with Marsha? Dick Martin.
Right? Yeah,
Dick Martin. He was band director over at George with.
Yeah.
I need to wrap this up, so I need to thank everybody for all their input. Thank everybody for all the comments about the persons that we need to call on. And we need to, as you said, Bill, we need to continue to remember where we come from and who we came from.
Amen.
Who had the influence on us as well. Thank you again, ladies, for being with us.
Thank you, ladies.
And we appreciate you all. Nothing but love.